All right, and we are officially live. This is Jeff on the chain, the Huddle Review. Looking forward to having a great conversation with everybody tonight. Lots of things to talk about. We'll just give it a minute, let the word get out into the YouTube sphere that we're actually live, streaming live here on Tuesday evening. It is Tuesday evening, 9:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We've got a few people bouncing in here. We got Edward, we've got Chip, we've got Nova, and looking forward to having an awesome chat tonight. If you bounce in, you want to do me a favor, you want to tweet this out, that'd be fantastic. Let's let other people know that we are on and we're live and getting ready to have an awesome conversation. So tonight, there's a ton of things to talk about. I want to get a little bit into the panic mode. Everybody is in this mode right now of sheer panic. So I just turned on the dehumidifier and it's already drying me out. So sorry about that. So here we go. Where do we start? Do we panic? Do we not panic? Is the entire global economy in meltdown mode? Are the politics impacting crypto? Is all of this, what's happening from an economic perspective, a political perspective, and a crypto perspective? That's what we want to talk about tonight, and we're going to get ready to do that because it's all getting ready to start right now. Boom, and that's how it works, and we're back. So here we go. What do we got? We got full-blown panic, according to Chip. That's where we're going from here. Connie, glad you made it in here. WB's got some Chinese bamboo. I don't know, that word Chinese and China just doesn't resonate right now, all things considered. But when we talk about Chinese bamboo, it's the culturing of the growth little by little until you finally get to that point. You set your goals out there and your ambitions out, on the horizon, and you achieve little bits at a time. Eventually, you're going to get there. But right now, we bring up China, Wuhan, and all those other things when we start talking about cervezas. You guys know what I'm talking about. And it's definitely impactful, and we got to figure out where we're going to go from here. So yes, do we panic, do we not panic? How do we address this? How do we hang in there right about now? I think there's a lot of concern from many people, and we're seeing it, and it's kind of crazy. What we are seeing. When I talk about crazy, I'm talking about on a global scale right now. We're seeing people hoarding toilet paper. Now, I'm trying to figure that all out and rationalize why people are going after the toilet paper specifically. I'm a little bit more concerned with the food and the coffee and the things that are going to sustain us. Not so much concerned whether or not there's this run on toilet paper. Now, here's the thing. So we've had a couple days go by of ups and downs in the financial markets. We've seen the cryptocurrency market down considerably. What do people do in times of trouble? People need to, keep their wits about them. We need to focus. Focus is critical right now. You have to, maintain your semblance of sanity, and you also have to look for opportunities. When we talk about opportunities, we have to look for opportunities for investing in our future. The sky isn't falling. This isn't the end of the world. So we have to look for these investment moments, because investment moments is what this is all about. Now, is a lot of this potentially fabricated. I don't know. I'm sure there's people out there that do. But we can look, and there's so much more going on than just a simple virus that got loose. So we have to look at things from a global political perspective, because there's things that are going on that are beyond our control. There's things that are going on that are impacting the economy. There's powers and power struggles taking place on a global scale that we really should be aware of, because it really does mean the difference between freedom and not. If we look at what's going on in the power struggles in China right now, it's interesting because I went back and I read a number of articles going on in China leading up to where we are today. And we had countless reporters in China that had disappeared after they attempted to report on what happened. We saw numerous doctors, and actually the number one doctor that reported and was the whistleblower on what was happening over in China supposedly died, and he was healthy in every other way, and he was one of the first casualties, so to speak, of this issue. And so the question that has to resonate in our minds really across the board, whether it's in China, whether it's in Iran, or other places, is to what extent are these power struggles consuming lives? Is it political? Is it economic? Or is it truly a health pandemic? And so we do know that, and we had a politician here in the U.S., Rahm Emanuel, that said, never let a crisis go unchecked, or whatever, take advantage of every crisis, whatever his statement was. And so we're seeing that, on a mass scale. Now, I don't know what's going on exactly. We can all kind of hint and guess and try to figure it out. But again, we have to maintain our semblance of reality. We have to maintain our semblance of dignity and decorum amongst the people. And I think that's really the most important message. Now, today I communicated with someone over in Belgium. Yesterday I spoke to somebody over in Denmark. Then I was emailing with I forget. I'm trying to think of where they were located. Over in Amman, Jordan. And there are people like all over the world. And the one common theme amongst all this is that everybody's still kind of business as usual, so to speak. We're communicating. We're trying to do business with one another. And that is a very important, critical point. Now, we're also looking out on the streets, and my, again, one of the concerns that I have as we look around, and what's up, Vet Bro and Moneybags and Jade, you guys all bounced in just recently here, and we got B Snowden here with us tonight. And hopefully, we'll get this message resonating. We'll get more people in the chat. I would love to hear people chiming in. Where are you from? What part of the world? What's going on in your part of the world? What we do see that we have to make sure we can't leave and we can't let it go unchecked and unfettered is exactly what Chip is talking about. Is socialism cannot go unchecked. Democratic socialism doesn't pay anywhere, and it's definitely a major issue. We see this power struggle. Now, is this power struggle going to impact us in our pocketbooks? And that's what we really have to, identify. And that's really what we have to be cautious of. Because as we see the global markets shifting, we definitely see an economic and political struggle in different parts of the world. Now, the other day when we were talking, we talked a little bit about on the round table, we talked a little bit about what was happening over in Russia, a little bit about what's happening over in China. But right now we see, even from a political perspective, in China, it's a very fragile political infrastructure with President Xi or Premier Xi or whatever you want to refer to him as. But just recently over the weekend, a billionaire that was really a thorn in his side because he really would represent the opposition in China. Well, just like the reporters, he too has disappeared from the scene. So we have to wonder what's going on over in China. We know what's happening over in Russia from a political perspective. So here we see consolidation of power. and we're talking about political power and economic control. Over in Russia, the consolidation is the fact that they passed another 12 years of Putin being able to be in office as the president of Russia. Now, that's problematic because we saw a very similar thing take place with Hugo Chavez in Venezuela when they passed the change in their constitution to allow for the extension of terms, and really eventually they get rid of term limits. So they kept extending, and then we know what we got in Venezuela. We're not Venezuela in the U.S. Most of Europe isn't Venezuela. Most of Europe, the U.S., Canada, and hopefully most of the countries in Latin America, aren't going down that same path, and we have to be very cautious of that path because in the end, it could be very disastrous. Now, what we're looking at also, as we go through and we're identifying, these shifts in the economics, and we're seeing these shifts in the politics, is that people react, and it amazes me how fast people are reacting. So on Wednesday night, we saw President Trump give a speech. The next day, we saw a financial meltdown in the stock market. It was amazing to see the FUD and the herd mentality, so to speak, of everybody just bailing in. And then on Friday, so Thursday was a bloodbath, more or less. Then Friday, what we see is that around 2 p.m., 3 p.m., Trump is out there, and people said, hey, what he's saying now sounds pretty good. All of a sudden, we see the stock market go back up again. Now we saw the exact same thing reacting. So today, we saw another little bit of a bump up in the stock market after it went down yesterday. People are a little bit tense and worried. But today we saw another little bit of a bump up in the stock market. Why? Because Trump and the administration is actually talking about ways to help the people. Now, that is, to me, a major concern right now. So, many people in this space talk about, we're talking about a financial economic reset on a global scale. I don't know if that's a reality, not a reality. We're at a moment in time right now where with the shutdown on a global scale, we've never seen anything like it. Whether we see the globalists behind it on one side and the patriot movement on the other side, whatever's taking place, we've never in history seen a complete shutdown across the board. We're seeing a minimal amount of planes flying internationally. We're soon probably going to see, we are already seeing a cut down in flight patterns domestically in Europe, everywhere else. That doesn't mean that flights aren't moving. That doesn't mean that goods aren't transacting from one place to the other, because they are. As we speak right now, there isn't a run on the grocery stores. Grocery stores are still open globally. Pharmacies are still open globally. Gas stations are still open. And so the semblance of society is still intact. But we are seeing little fragments of the globalist movement, of that march into socialism, when you see de Blasio from New York starts talking about nationalizing certain companies and resources. Now, we have to be extremely, extremely careful when we talk about the nationalization of our private sector. Now, you can incorporate the private sector, you can partner with the private sector, just as Trump was doing as he's standing there with all those CEOs. He got all the CEOs of major companies together in order to create a little bit of momentum and actually do something, from a positive perspective, to actually try to, fix whatever they're working on fixing. Now, there's a lot of indicators here. So I'm looking at some of these comments as they're flying by. Kelly Slade, they're closing bars and restaurants in Orlando. Oh, and I do want to say happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody out there. So today was supposed to be the Irish bar day, the Irish pub day, and enjoying at the Irish pub drinking Guinness. So we had to do that at home, and put the Irish music on and actually enjoy St. Patrick's Day at home. So I don't like disruptions to where it's extremely, extremely difficult. So martial law, as Marco Rubio says, martial law. Yeah, so there's definitely, again, so here we go. And this is important for us. Hearing from others around the world, what's happening over in Australia, what's happening over, wherever it might be. So Kelly Slade, liquor stores are still open. Everything else is shutting down. So we have grocery stores, liquor stores, gas stations. You can move around. I heard that it was in Pittsburgh or Philadelphia or whatever it was. They were closing liquor stores. So it's important the fact that they are closing down these restaurants, but there's still delivery, there's still carry out and pickup. So that's critical. Let me go back to the comment on Australia because we need to hear about what's going on over there. Simon I. Bank Freely says the supermarkets in Australia are empty. Every life and every shelf is empty. So we need to see some movement over there. Hopefully that changes. Hopefully the trucks are trying to deliver product. And I know yesterday, last night I went out and I said, I'm going to go to the smaller market down the street. They happen to be moving some of their product around. I went down there at 7 p.m. There was nobody in there. Shelves are full. They're still prepared foods. So I stacked up on some prepared foods, got some other items, came back home. I said, you know what, I'm going to skip Whole Foods. I don't want to deal with that. But at some point here, I'm ordering stuff on Amazon, just doing the normal routine. But the more people that I've been speaking to, today, just trying to just stay focused on business. The conversation keeps coming up. People are saying, hey, what's going on? What's going on in your country? What are we seeing? But for some reason across the world, everybody's gravitating towards wanting to hoard toilet paper for whatever reason again. So, see, digital asset conductor, closing bars and restaurants at 8 here. Yeah, so here we're in the midst of spring break in Florida. And I don't know what all the people are going to do, where they're going, what's going to happen. That's it's amazing. So let's see. You still going to a bank? Haven't been so here's also one of my concerns is if things do heat up, what's going to happen with banks if they try to shut down a bank? Where you can't access funds. Now, one of the things that came up in the other evening. We're talking about I'm forgetting the term. I just blanked out on the term, but not a banking holiday. I don't know why I can't remember it, but anyhow, so what we're looking at here also is, and really, how do you get around this when you have the entire governments of the entire world that are shutting down society? But my biggest concern for the workers, is that if you're going to put a pause on tourism, if you're going to put a pause on these restaurants, you're not going to allow them to be open, what happens to all the service employment? So we're talking about service employment in hotels, service employment in restaurants, and then it goes beyond that as well. So we have a drop off of tourism, closing restaurants, closing bars. All these people have to go home. If they're just doing carry out, one of the requests was take your waiters and wait staff, waitresses, waiters, and have them do delivery, or have them somehow serve as a function to still support the customer base in one way, so they can still make money, so they can still earn tips. Now, what happens if the restaurants are closed for 2 weeks, or they're just doing carry out, but you have half the staff isn't able to work, and they're not, even if they're going to pay them a small amount, they're not getting their tips. They're not getting what they're normally used to getting. That becomes a little problematic. So when we talk about a global financial issue, we might be facing a smaller microcosm of that financial issue now. But as we move forward, 1, 2, 3 months, 6 months from now, what's going to happen over that gap in time in order to make it up? And so that's why there was a lot of discussion about what can can governments do to mitigate that? So we have people that have mortgages, they have car loans, they have all these different things. Now, I'm trying to think, can they issue and say, okay, banks, you're not collecting mortgages, you're not collecting car loans or anything like that for a period of a month, or let's say 2 months. But that only works for a segment of the population. So what happens to the other segment of the population that are renters, for instance? So now, what about the person that owns the home? You still have utilities. So if you said, okay, we're going to put across the board freeze on everything, how do you move goods? What about logistics and transport and gas? What about the gas station owners? How are you going to move all of these goods around to the people? The government won't be able to cope with that. So there's other ideas that are coming to the forefront. One thing that we see, and this is really important when we consider what's happening in the crypto space, we'll get there in a second, but we really have to take a lot of this into consideration, as governments again are looking for methodology to make sure that as we come out of this, we're not seeing a much depressed economy, and so the governments, like in the U.S. now, they're talking about, can they start sending money to people? Can they send money to every individual? Are they going to send it per individual in the household? Does that help offset the cost of living that people are going to suffer? What about the businesses? And this, on a global scale. Now, the one thing that we saw, and this is really interesting, as we saw the drop and the really emotional response to the stock market movement, is that we saw a lot of people. Obviously, we saw the stock markets drop and crash, but on the crypto side, we also saw a lot of that, the cut in half of the valuation. And now we're seeing it relatively stabilized. It's going up and down by maybe 5 to 10%. Which is interesting. I think it's a dangerous spot if people are trying to trade on that, but maybe they can. If you want to take that risk, it's up and down, up and down. I keep getting notifications of those movements. However, what we are seeing, whether it's in the stock market, or in the crypto space, are potential buying opportunities. Again, thinking not for tomorrow necessarily, but a little bit further down the road, but making sure that if you are going to say, hey, these are great buying opportunities, that you're not taking money that you need to live in order to invest in that, because the return on your investment there might not be a month away, it might not be 2 months away. It could take a day, it could take a week, or it could take a few months in order for the crypto market to get back on track, for the stock market to get back on track. We're not really sure what's going to happen, but what we do know for certain is that when you have assets drop off, whether it's in the stock market or the crypto space, that they are going to come back. And that's something that I feel very confident in myself. But now, I know I've had these conversations, and it was really if you're investing and you're looking for that bottom, can you ever find a bottom? When do you know, if you're at the very, very bottom? And so all we could say is we know where we were before. We've seen lows like this before as well. And if you dollar cost average on the way down, you can feel comfortable. Let's say take XRP or Bitcoin, for instance. Bitcoin hovering in that $4,900 to like $5,400 range. Can you dollar cost average if you bought a little bit and you don't want to put everything? Let's say you have $1,000 that you want to invest. Are you going to take all of your $1,000 and put it in right now? Or are you going to break it up and maybe do 500, 500, 250, 250, 250, and you want to dollar cost average that and see where the market's going? Because if you have a buy point, let's say right now, I'm just strategies. I guess that's my point, is that as we look for these buying opportunities, we want to be able to use the right strategy in order to do that. Now, again, we don't know exactly what's going to happen? Can the bottom completely fall out of the stock market and the crypto market, and can it hit an even further low? I don't know. We're 1 week into this thing, if that, in the U.S. market. We're seeing China somewhat coming out of it. We're seeing Europe kind of in that upper end of it. So they're starting to really close off borders. The EU just closed off their borders today. Italy is still struggling a little bit, but there's a lot of ramification here that we have to really consider. So let me look at what you guys are responding to here and in the chat. I saw some great comments. I know I saw some comments on Irish whiskey and vodka. Maybe not Irish whiskey, but XRP Hodler for life was saying, we know liquidity is the issue, cash on hand. That should worry every person here who does not have cash on hand. Just saying, because if it gets worse, you need cash. It's too late. That's a good point. So that's one thing that you want to do from a cash on hand perspective is definitely have actual cash on hand and make sure that you're in a safe spot for that, so that if you do need it, it's available. If there's an issue with the banks, if the economy does start falling out, even like with a stock market, when they saw, what is it, greater than a 20% drop, it automatically freezes the trading. So they put some some safety mechanisms in place so you don't have an all-out bottom crash on the stock market. Now that's as a whole. It'd be interesting at some point if they actually do the same thing with the crypto space. So let's see, what else do we have here? Hang on 1 second. Just scrolling back through the chat. Dan, I'm down to dryer sheets for toilet paper. Simon says 21 new cases in Australia. One of them had no. So that's interesting too. Is that are we seeing how are we seeing the progress and the I guess the movement of what we're seeing here. And I keep looking at this. I had another conversation with someone today, and I've been talking to a lot of people in the medical space, really trying to analyze percentages here. And so there's maybe like 120 plus thousand people that have been diagnosed, let's say, with the cerveza. And so of those 128,000 plus or minus, you have about 4 or 5,000 that have died as a result of it. Now, if you draw equal comparisons, and what we're looking for is, we only know of the 120 plus thousand that have been diagnosed, because that means that there's, if it's really, 2 or 3 to 1 that are infected, that means that there's probably a lot more people that actually were infected by the cerveza, but were never diagnosed. Now, is that number 300,000? Is it 1 million? Is it 2 million? Is it 3 million? I don't know. Nobody's reporting on how many people could have actually been infected. And if that many people were really infected, then we're seeing, smaller numbers that are actually going in and getting diagnosed by it. And then you're seeing a smaller number that are actually dying from it, as opposed to where we are with the flu. And I have to go back and double check the global number on the flu deaths, but I believe that last year there were somewhere between 600 to 650,000 deaths from the flu globally. I know in the U.S. there are around 60,000 people died of the flu last year. There were about 650,000 reported cases, and I don't know how many millions and millions that actually would have had the flu. And then if you look at the H1N1, there were 60 million people that were infected by H1N1 in the 2009-2010 period of time in the U.S. 60 million in the United States, with 12,000 deaths. So, why, and these are a lot of the questions that we have to ask, because not only is it impacting us politically, not only is it impacting our lives right now on a day-to-day basis because of what we have to do. Now, in 2009, Nobody had to make any changes to their life, and yeah, and really nobody seemed to really care about it, that people were dying, and that actually 12,000 people actually died of it. So here we have 102,000 this year for the flu. Is that 102,000 people died of the flu, or is what is? I gotta believe that's what that number is. So the numbers overall, so thread work 20 now confirmed in New Zealand. So are the numbers relatively small? Is this containment really changing things? Is the containment that they're trying to do, is there something else that's going on right now that we need to identify? They're shutting down airspace. They're really, ratcheting down on life on a global scale. The World Health Organization, do we trust the World Health Organization and what they say? Does the World Health Organization have something to do with this green movement, and what their objectives are? And how does crypto factor into all of this, as the economies of scale, or from a global perspective? So let's say, how is the crypto going to factor in? How is that going to assist in the liquidity, and getting people back out of recession? What's going to happen right now between the U.S. and China? Because there's a lot of tension going on between the U.S. and China's economy is definitely taking a major hit. Now, is the Chinese, business, government, whatever we want to call it, are they investing in our stock market as our stock market is dropping to lows? Are they investing in cryptocurrency? We do know that the Chinese government has intention to roll out central bank digital currency. They want the digital yuan. So, what exactly is happening from that perspective? But what we do know, almost for certain, that after all this is said and done, that companies in the U.S. and Europe or wherever they might be are not going to stay in China, and put our national securities at risk. Pharma companies, the pharmaceutical companies, which is really, what I'm shocked about. I'm really, stunned that we had pharmaceutical companies manufacturing to the extent that they were over in China. That's just stunning to me that the government has allowed something like that to occur. It's definitely a national security issue, and that needs to change immediately. So I'm anticipating that we're going to see pharma, scale back into the U.S. at a rapid pace. And then, so if we have pharma coming back, we're going to see a lot of the other big factories coming back here. Now, you have to think about it from a perspective that, we have, and thinking about this from an American perspective in the U.S., we have an amazing economic bloc that could be built here, with Mexico in the south and Canada in the north, and we got Latin America, and really, we should really have, something amazing here economically speaking. However, we can't have a scenario where in the U.S., and you hear this so much, from those that want to excuse the fact that, let's say, Apple has factories over in China because Apple wants to make bigger profits, or pharma wants to make bigger profits, so they manufacture over in China in factories that have labor that are working, that have really, there's no bounds to how they can abuse their workforce and the little amounts of money that they're paying them over there, while you have a huge, growing middle class and a huge growing wealthy class in China. There's still a major underclass that are the factory workers that get paid peanuts, that are being manipulated by the government and these big businesses. Now, I see it as a very hypocritical thing, and obviously we have all these products, and do we want them to be cheap? Are they really cheap? At one point, you could have shoes made over in China, and you could pay $100 to $200 for shoes that were made in Italy. Sorry. You get nice leather shoes that were made over in Italy for about $100 or $200. Then all of a sudden, you saw all production moved over to China, and those shoes went down to maybe $50. Then all of a sudden they were $70. Then all of a sudden they were $100. So now all of a sudden you're spending $100 to $200 for shoes that were made in China. And if you want Italian-made shoes, they're $400 or $500. That's kind of the fluctuation we've seen. So there's different levels of product, even in the U.S., where it's made in China. You can go to high-end merchandise. This is what gets me. So would phones really be $3,000? I don't really think they would be. I think that, the technology that's in that phone isn't any different than the technology that's in the laptop that's sitting in front of me, other than it's on a smaller scale. I don't believe that the cost of production of that smaller chipset and SSD storage technology in my cell phone is drastically different. Now, that being said, that means that the production of it is definitely, the manufacturers are definitely making a much higher margin. And that's what you hear all the time. How can we make this cheaper over in China? And that's problematic from many different reasons, because the reason you can make it cheaper is because they're taking advantage of the labor in China. Now, how is that justifiable when in the United States they're talking about living wages and $15 minimum wage, but yet they're able to rationalize the fact that this stuff is moving over to China? I think that that's extremely problematic. And that's also an area where we see, a big advantage in this blockchain space. We see a huge advantage in cryptocurrency and digital asset, because it does allow for the transparency of the product and the goods. It doesn't give us exposure to the cost. However, it does give us some transparency to the overall lineage of production. And the other part of it is it also opens up the economy, or an economy, to people all over the world, to where they might be taken advantage of, where otherwise with the ability to actually trade and build a business into the blockchain or the crypto space is major. So kind of went off on a thing here. Let me go here. Let's see. My aunt is a doctor, worked for the FDA. Trust me on this. I'm coming in at the bottom of your conversation here. That doesn't help. We have no antibodies to fight it. Can't build a tolerance. I don't know, Kelly. I've heard, I work around doctors, all day long, and I've spoken to, multiple people on the research side as well, and I have a lot of people that I work with in the medical space, and I'm hearing things that are different. So I don't know that anybody has the clear picture of it. However, people do build up some sort of an immunity, not immunity, but an antibody to it, to where it does decrease the potency of it. But this one, who knows? So I don't know. There's multiple opinions on it right now. There's also enough research showing that in the sunlight under UV, that it can actually kill the viruses on your clothing, on your hands, on the boxes, whatever. If you're if things are outside, it's not going to be as a major of an issue. And so the one thing that we know about this across, and it's easily identifiable, is that we know exactly who it impacts, who it's a danger to. We know how it's been transmitted, and we know more or less. I don't want to say how to prevent it, but we know exactly where it came from. So are we entering into this first phase? Because that my concern, and Kelly's saying it exactly, as a bioweapon. Is this the beginning of the virus wars? Because if we are entering that phase, there's other mechanisms in place to respond to that. And we have been at war with China for a long time. And we just haven't acknowledged it. China's been taking advantage from multiple different perspectives as they've raped and pillaged all of our copyrights and trademarks and everything else. As we put in Nike through the front door, the copied product goes out the back door, and that's been with software, that's been with physical goods. There's a major issue within China. The fact that they've fully embraced that counterfeiting culture, even though they supposedly go after it. The wealthy in China want American products. Why do they want American products? Because they know that there's an issue with their products in China. And so, that to me, is enough to represent what the major issue is. So this has been a long time coming. Now, who was it that said? So Jet Digital said we're at war because the U.S. doesn't want to pay its debt. There's no reason at this point why we should pay our debt. We've already paid the debt to China, again, as they've stolen our property rights over and over and over again. You think about some of the products that come out of there, some of their cell phones that come out of there that are reverse engineered. They don't own the technology. They don't know anything about the technology. You definitely see it in the medical space, where medical products are reverse engineered, and then they sell them and supposedly fit them and package them with all of the different features. It becomes super problematic, But I'm kind of going off on a tangent here. But the other component here that we have to really look at is that we have the financial crisis, the political crisis that could go on as we're talking about China even. But the other element here is the crypto side of it, because China really has has migrated towards the mining, and so they put whatever amount of mining of resources into mining Bitcoin. Do they then have a mechanism of control over the Bitcoin? That becomes a big issue. Sorry, yeah, take a breath. I gotta shut off this dehumidifier. Hang on. Good and bad of a dehumidifier, but this thing's killing me. There we go. It's just completely drying me out. So here we go. All right, Aaron, the debt to China is only 1 trillion. Under the contracted trade deals, that debt's non-topic. Plus, if China dumped the T-bills, they would only hurt them more. I think so too. Now, ODL will wash away all debt. So I think that's really another basis for considering where the digital asset space is going, because is the ODL, is that going to be a mechanism, and how is that going to look? What's actually happening with that as governments and banks begin to embrace the digital asset, and the central bank digital currencies. It's really interesting, and it puts all of these other problems that are occurring that really we have no control over. The one thing that we have control over is to make sure that we're educated, to make sure that we are taking advantage of good investment opportunities, that we're not following in the herd mentality, that we do things in a very constructive, I don't want to say predictive, but a very planned way. We want to make sure that as we walk down this path, investing and we're doing our own due diligence to make the right choices. And that's, again, one of the areas that I've seen that to me is really so symbolic of what's happened within the crypto space, to allow people to truly get in and embrace what's happening on a global scale. For so many years, I would focus in on the politics of things, the international politics of things, and people were so concerned about what was happening, and it still goes on, obviously, but but most people, then, nobody wanted to think about global politics when I was, talking about global politics. And I can remember I had a huge conversation with somebody about the 93 World Trade Center bombing. And we're at dinner with a group of people, a large group of people, and we're talking about the Middle East. And we started talking about the 93 World Trade Center bombing. And I told him, I said, the U.S. didn't learn, from the first incident. There's been too many incidents of terror attacks against U.S. national interest. And I said that we're in a bad position to where it could happen again in the U.S. And this is pre 9/11. So, we have to be very astute, and hopefully our government and our officials are also astute in this movement. And sometimes it falls on us, to really help and educate them. As we've seen, like in the digital asset space, and trying to reach out to congressional representatives and telling them, hey, digital asset blockchain technology is really significant to our growth, especially now when we're seeing manipulation of the different markets, like what China can do, and what they're doing. And so there's just so much more, that has to happen. So, so anyhow, Aaron, this is a good comment. How to implement mass adoption: quarantine people to their homes, give them education via the web on digital assets, send them XRP from escrow instead of checks for the stimulus that Trump. Wow, could you imagine that? I mean, that's amazing, Aaron. That's crazy. Could you imagine? Because that's what they're talking about, right? They want to send money to people as a stimulus. Now, didn't the head of, I forget his title, from Coinbase, was just appointed by Mnuchin. That to me is really amazing as well. That you're starting to see players from before as government players moving into digital asset space. Now you're seeing players in the digital asset space moving into government, taking some interesting positions. That would be pretty monumental, Aaron, if something like that happened. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, that would be amazing. But you're clearing the streets. You're keeping people home. We're cleaning up the skies from pollution in China. Maybe they can actually see in front of their face over there. There's so much pollution. But they're also changing the way people are working on a grander scale. We're also seeing, how kids are being educated. We're seeing that there's a huge amount of money wasted, potentially. I don't know if people will see that, but we can see it. There's a lot of resources being wasted in how we're educating our youth, and seeing the technologies that are being employed. Today was my son's first day in his online schooling. The teachers are utilizing Zoom technology, so I've been emailing them, trying to give them some assistance as they roll that out. But they already have their online Google Classrooms and all these other technologies that they've been using. But now they're having their first Zoom meeting tomorrow. I introduced them to video email that they could potentially use. And so there's so many things that they're going to be doing with the kids and college level. And then we're seeing from a work perspective, people are starting to work out of the house. So imagine the amount of money's saved as well. I mean, it's really transitioning society in a different direction, which is interesting. So I'm kind of looking at it with a little bit of skepticism to see how this turns out. But we'll see where we go from here. So I don't know. It looks like I've been streaming here for an hour. I can't do a 4-hour DNI type stream. That would kill me. I'm already I'm already losing my voice here after an hour. I kind of went on a bunch of tangents. So let's see. Connie was saying to Perfect Stable Sharpie, They have to finish out the year online, uh, just not gathering at the schools. Yeah, so that's really interesting. Appreciate all of you guys. Edward, appreciate your comments. Um, we'll see. Hopefully you guys, keep posting back in here. Let us know what's going on. Leave some comments below. So it's great that we're in the chat. If you guys can post some comments on the video as well, that definitely helps out. Thursday night we'll be live streaming Deep Dive. I believe D and I have got that scheduled the right way. So we're going to be streaming there. That'll be awesome. Oh, Aaron said, I'm not saying they would actually send actual XRP, but the escrow could be swapped for a stable. Could be interesting. Yeah, so let's keep our eyes out for that. Any interesting information. If you guys find anything, any articles, if you guys have any opinions on something, go to our Telegram channel. Chip, if you could post the Telegram channel up in there right now, it's but if you go to t.me/on-the-chain_roundtable, you go over there. That's where we have an engaged conversation going on. Oh, shoot, the comments are disabled? I hope not. I hope they're not disabled. Chip's going to be streaming tomorrow. Chip, throw in the Telegram link if you can. But if you guys go over there, we can continue the conversation. Any ideas, opinions, anything you guys want to hear on our next upcoming streams, definitely let us know on the Telegram. Spanish Fly, great to see you here. Jet Digital, Perfect Stable Sharpie, Connie as always, Richter, Aaron, and everybody else that's here with us tonight. Really appreciate all you guys. Let's check out Chip's live stream tomorrow. Then check out the deep dive on Thursday. And that's it. I think I'm out of here. Let me see if we can do it. Let's go out of here in style. Here we go. Huh. Well, that's the outro. There you go. I'm out of here. I'll check you guys out later.